Despite what most people think, special education students spend the majority of their day in regular or general education classrooms. About 65% of special education students in Texas and nationwide spend 80% of their day in general education. My name is Scott Roselle, and I help teachers like you pass their certification exams. This video is going to prepare you for the TExES Special Education Supplemental test, also known as TExES 163. Now, this video is going to cover three things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts to appear on the test, and we're going to look at some authentic practice questions so you understand how those concepts will be reflected on the test. Now, this is a test for a supplemental certification, meaning it's on top of a regular certification. Now, you might be thinking, why on earth would I want to take another certification exam? And that's a really good question. But what this exam is going to do is demonstrate that you have the knowledge and skills required to help all those special education students that are in the general education classroom. So by taking this test, you're really going to set yourself apart at the next level to either a principal or an HR manager. Can I get a cha-ching from anyone who's super excited to go through this with me?
Hey, cha-ching, yeah.
Thank you. Now, the TExES 163 exam is broken into three different domains: understanding individuals with disabilities and evaluating their needs, promoting student learning and development, and finally, foundations and professional roles and responsibilities. Each domain has between 2 and 5 competencies nestled underneath it. We'll get started with the domain that makes up the smallest portion of the exam at 13%, but stick around because we're going to tackle the largest domain right after this. Domain 1 consists of 2 competencies. The first is all about the categories of disability and their effects. The second competency covers evaluation and assessment. Let's dig into the first one, IDEA. Now, IDEA stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a legislation that governs how special education is implemented in school, and you're going to see this acronym a lot. There are 13 categories defined by IDEA, and to receive special education services, a student must qualify under one of the 13 categories. Now, you will need to know the defining characteristics of these categories, as well as the impact they have on learning, but the good news is, we've got you covered in our 240 TExES 163 study guide. We cover all 13 categories and their impact, so you don't have to go scouring the internet trying to figure it out in one place. Now let's talk about the second competency under Domain 1. This competency is all about evaluation and assessment. You'll need to know terms like formal, informal, formative, summative, criteria referenced, curriculum-based, portfolio, percentile rank, and finally, but not least, grade equivalent. Those are terms that are going to come up on this test. And if you want a sneak peek at what some of those terms mean, let's take a look at an actual 240 video and you'll see exactly how we cover it in the study guide.
Now let's talk about the differences between formative and summative assessment. Formative assessments are assessments for learning. They are used to guide instruction, meaning they're administered to assess students' progress toward meeting a learning objective, so teachers can adjust instruction as needed. They help teachers answer the question, what do I teach next? Summative assessments are assessments of learning. They are used to gauge instruction by determining whether or not students mastered a learning objective. Teachers use them to answer the question, what did my students learn? Meaning, what do they know now, or what are they able to do?
Next, we're going to dive into Domain 2. It's worth about 1/3 of your score, so this is a big one, and I referenced it before. Competencies 3 through 7 fall under Domain 2. Now let's get into the first competency, planning instruction. 2 simple words that strike fear into the heart of every teacher, but it doesn't have to be this way, does it?
Right, yeah.
Thanks, cameraman. Now, I'm gonna go over some concepts that you absolutely need to know, but to really get the confidence you deserve, subscribe to the 240 study guide because it's gonna go much more in depth than just this video. The key word is collaboration. As a special educator, you're gonna collaborate a lot with general education teachers, administrators, parents, speech therapists, occupational therapists, the school nurse, Elmo from Sesame Street, everybody. Remember how we learned the word collaborate? Like opening gates? As a special education teacher, you open a lot of gates. Did you not learn it that? Everyone knows that.
I never learned it that way. That might be a you thing.
Regardless, some form of the word collaborate comes up 9 times throughout the exam standards. 9 times. That's a lot of collaboration. You need to be prepared to collaborate with general education teachers to plan instructions for students receiving special education services. Now, you do this by knowing what they need to learn based on grade level standards. You're going to contribute your expert knowledge on how to help students learn the content based on the instructional strategies that support the students' needs. Also, a big part of collaborating is to plan instruction that ensures students' IEPs are being followed in all educational settings. Just in case you didn't know, IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. Now, let's talk about assistive technology, which sounds intimidating and complex, which it can be, but it can also be as simple as a pencil grip that helps students hold their pencils in a way that makes it easier to write. The most important thing to remember when answering questions about assistive technology is that it should support both the student's special needs and what the student is trying to accomplish. For example, a device for playing audio recordings of reading material could benefit 2 types of students. It could benefit a student with a visual impairment and a student with a specific learning disability in reading. The AT aligns with both the need and the task. And that's the key takeaway for this competency. There's a lot more about assistive technology and all the ways to implement it, but in the 240 study guide, we've already created a video specifically about assistive technology and what you need to know specifically for the test. All right, let's move on. This competency is about promoting educational performance. That's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I was being rhetorical. It's a very big deal. It's pretty much the most important part about being a teacher. And there is a lot we can talk about this, but a key concept I want you to know is differentiation. Differentiation is all about meeting students where they are and providing what they need to help them progress. Do you remember this from earlier? You can always use the same mode of thinking for answering questions about differentiation. Anytime differentiation comes up on the test, all you need to focus on is what does that student need for that particular student to be successful. All right, I think we've got that. Let's keep this moving. The next competency focuses on behavior and social skills. Let's discuss some key terms that you have to know for this portion of the TExES 163. PBIS, FBA, and BIP. Half the battle of passing this exam is knowing your acronyms. And the acronym to that is actually HIBDONKTIKA. PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Intervention and Support. It is a proactive approach to promote positive behavior for all students. And sometimes students need a little extra support to promote positive behavior. This is where an FBA and a BIP may come in. An FBA is an evaluation focused on behavior that strives to determine what is causing the undesired behaviors. Students undergoing a special education evaluation, students with an IEP or 504, and students in certain serious school discipline situations are eligible for an FBA. You see, all behaviors have a purpose. Students act in certain ways for a reason. An FBA seeks to determine what these reasons are. BIP is short for Behavior Intervention Plan. A BIP is a formal written plan to address and improve student behavior. It defines the undesired behavior, describes why it's occurring, and outlines a plan to use strategies and supports to help. So you need to remember an FBA determines why behavior occurs, and a BIP is a plan to create an improvement. Now, we've scratched the surface with some really key information, but to really dig in with acronyms, the BIPs, the HIPs, the MIPs, and the YIPs, you have to dig in more. I cannot recommend more highly a 240 study guide to really give you the support you need to understand everything there is. Now, there's just one competency left in Domain 2, so let's get into it. This competency covers transitioning students out of a special education service and into the next phase of their lives. Because as much time and attention as teachers pour into their students, they're like little baby birds that have to leave the nest.
Is that a bird?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to let my personality shine through here. These people deserve some entertainment. And as hard as that may be, it's comforting to know that a plan must be established before a student receiving special education services leaves high school. In fact, in TExES, that planning starts when the student is 14. Like many components of special education, collaboration is key for transition planning, and it is required that the student must be invited to participate in the process. Whew. We have made it through Domain 2, and I am excited.
It's pretty sick.
Thank you. Finally, some peanut gallery that I'm liking here. Let's get into foundations of special education. Do you remember how IDEA governs how school districts provide special education services to students? Well, there are 6 main components of this legislation. Now, we've already discussed one of them, the IEP, but now let's dig into FAPE and LRE. FAPE stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. And the biggest takeaway here is that every student is entitled to, well, a free and appropriate public education, a FAPE, no matter the student's disability. Schools can't deny services. It's against the law. LRE stands for Least Restrictive Environment. This means that to the maximum extent possible, students with disabilities should be educated with their non-disabled peers. In simple terms, students receiving special education services should not be removed from the general education classroom unless it is necessary for their learning, which is not up to an individual teacher to decide, but must be determined by a committee based on evaluation and outlined in the student's IEP. Now that our minds are on the laws that govern special education, let's discuss legal and ethical requirements. Written consent is needed before an evaluation can begin, and also before special education services outlined in an IEP can be initially implemented. Now let's get into the lighter part of the domain. I told you earlier that we'd circle back to collaboration. Here we are. Educating students with special needs is not a solo gig. When it comes to collaborating, special education teachers wear a lot of hats. The resource hat, the advocate hat, the communicator hat. I mean, these are just some of the most important collaborative roles in the education process. When answering questions from this competency, always go with what's in the best interest of the child, keeps the parents informed and involved, and of course, follows the law. Now that we've gone over some of the big competencies in all 3 domains, let's run through some practice questions to show how these concepts are going to appear on the test. And if you want a lot of practice questions, just click on the free practice test below. You'll get a full test form. At the end, you get a score report, and you'll be able to subscribe to 240 and get a personalized study plan catered to you. Now, let's dive right into the questions. Here's one where we need to be able to classify disabilities. This question is asking us to identify a trait of a student with a specific learning disability. This choice, the student demonstrates deficits in academic achievement when compared to cognitive abilities. Therefore, it's an indicator of a specific learning disability. So this choice is correct. Remember when we talked about evaluation and assessment? I want to show you the ways that that's going to be reflected in a question on the test. Maxwell is a 5th grade student who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also referred to as ADHD, another acronym. During his annual IEP meeting, the special education teacher shares the results of Maxwell's most recent unit test in the 4 core subjects. This data falls under which type of assessment? Formative, informal, norm-referenced, summative. This is the best choice. Did you need to know that the student had ADHD to answer this question? How about that the setting was an IEP? Nope, erroneous. Erroneous on all accounts. This question is purely about types of assessment. It's just put through the lens of special education situation. Let's look at one more. A general education teacher is concerned about teaching an upcoming unit to the student receiving special education services in the class. What is the most effective way for the special education teacher to collaborate with a general education teacher? The first step in planning instruction for a student receiving special education services is always referring to the IEP. The plan has already been created to help the student learn content in class, and it's the special education teacher's responsibility to ensure the accommodations are being followed in the general education classroom. Now let's look at one about assistive technology. A student with fine motor coordination and writing difficulties who receives in-class support with the occupational therapist would benefit from what accommodation? Okay, let's think about our formula. The student needs fine motor support to help them write. The only choice that directly aligns with the need and the task is this choice, the use of adaptive writing utensils. While the other choices might seem appealing, they require too much of a leap based on what we know from the question stem. Now let's look at a question from Behavior and Social Skills Competency. A student has shown a significant increase in inappropriate behaviors. These behaviors continue to occur in structured and unstructured school settings. The teacher has not seen an improvement in behavior despite providing specifically designed interventions. What should the IEP team consider next in order to support the student? It sounds like this student would benefit from a BIP, but an FBA should happen first. The function of the behavior, along with other important information, must be determined before a plan is made to improve. Now, for a question about special education foundations. Which of the following is a provision of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act? The correct answer is ensuring that the student is provided with reasonable accommodations to access the curriculum. Section 504 is another essential piece of legislation to know for your special education exam. It comes up a lot along with IDEA. And guess what? We also have that covered in the study guide. We have you covered from A to Z, acronym to acronym, and there's a lot of them. You don't have to worry when you use a 240 study guide. Let me give you one about collaborating with parents. And this one's a tricky one. A special education teacher is preparing to hold an IEP meeting for a student whose parents do not speak English. Which of the following is the most appropriate way to address the parents' language needs? One of the ways a special education teacher can effectively collaborate with parents is by making sure that they are equipped to participate meaningfully in meetings about their child's education. It is not anyone else's responsibility to assure the input is comprehensible to parents, and providing translated documents after the meeting does not allow parents to participate during the meeting. This means that this choice is the best. Now that's just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are going to be assessed and reflected on the actual test. Congratulations for finishing the video! Even you, camera guy.
Yeah.
If you found this helpful, give it a like. There's still a whole lot more to learn. Our TExES 163 study guide has plenty of practice questions, just like the ones we walked through right now. It has readable and watchable instructional content. So if you really want to make sure you're prepared for the TExES Special Education Supplemental, take the next step and subscribe to a 240 study guide. It has hours of video so you can watch and listen while doing chores, all the content's test aligned so you know exactly what you're studying, and it has hundreds of authentic practice questions so you can be sure you're ready. And as always, it has a money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now and get started.